I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. And a hello, big hello to everyone in Bowling Green or listening on the internet wherever or whenever you may be. My name is Shehbaz Khan, and I am here with my dog-loving co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Welcome, Rebecca. Together, Rebecca and I are about to create another amazing hour of radio called For a Green Future. This show, For a Green Future, is a show about ecology and environment, and we talk about those subjects in the way that they affect you, your wealth, your health, and your happiness, and the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family, and co-workers, and the puppies of all ages, and the cats, and the bats, and the bugs, and pretty much everybody and everything, because we are all wrapped up together on this sparkling gem of a planet called Earth. We have a great show for you today. First, we are going to chat a little bit. Then we have an interview with not one, but two special guests. Pat Marida, longtime friend of the show, and Joe Mangano, who has been studying the health effects of nuclear energy for over 30 years. He will be making his first appearance. Then, at the bottom of the hour, we'll hear from our generous patrons and sponsors. After that, we'll hear from Rebecca. Rebecca, what are you going to talk to us about today?
Prairies, a broad subject.
Wow, prairies. Okay, that sounds interesting and maybe a little tipsy because it's a very broad topic.
Definitely.
Yeah. Then it's ecological news. As always, we'd also like to hear from you at 877-909-1007. That is 877-909-1007. This is a call-in show and it gets better every time you call. You can call in and share your experiences, your observations about the nature and the effects of nature around you, and inform us what is happening around your neighborhood. Okay, last weekend was Memorial Day, and I wanted to mention that we have received some very nice emails from listeners complimenting us on our Memorial Day commentary. We really appreciate your feedback, and just a reminder, comments can be sent to joe@joedemayor.for-a-green-future.org. That is joe@joedemayor.for-a-green-future.org. So, those of who looked up at the full moon last night might have noticed that it was blood red. This is not some kind of foreshadowing of terrible things to come. It's actually a result of terrible things that are happening right now.
I think it kind of is a foreshadowing of terrible things to come because it's maybe just a warm up.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's correct. Canada is on fire. It's been burning for about a month. The scale is almost unimaginable. 2.7 million hectares have burned so far this year. That's 6.66 million acres. That's 10 times the average area burned in a typical year, an area larger than the state of Vermont. There are over 200 fires burning in every Canadian province. Half of them are out of control despite the fact that the federal government has mobilized federal troops. Over 30,000 Canadians have been displaced from their homes, including 10,000 people in coastal Quebec, who were evacuated just this week. It's telling that the news media is all but ignoring one of the worst fire seasons in Canadian history. It's also telling that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is pushing ahead with pipelines, deforestation, and nuclear power, even as his country burns down around him. The red moon reminds us that every place and everyone on the planet really is connected. Many of those fires are over 1,000 miles away. But that's not far enough for us to escape the ash and particulates those burning forests put into the air. Just as we can't escape the particles, we also can't escape the gases. Gases like carbon dioxide mix more widely and more readily than particles like soup. In fact, right now, you are breathing carbon dioxide molecules that were put into the atmosphere a few weeks ago by lions and zebras on the African plains. We are also breathing in carbon dioxide put into the air by the coal plants in China and volcanoes that are currently erupting in places like Sicily. There is no over there on the planet when it comes to the mixing of molecules in our atmosphere. Everywhere on Earth is here because all those gases are distributed all over the world. It's the mix of gases in the atmosphere combined with its distance from the sun that determines the planet's climate. Venus is closer to the sun, so you would expect it to be hotter, but the surface temperature is 900 degrees Fahrenheit. If you could give Venus Earth's atmosphere, its temperature would drop to 95 degrees. The reason Venus is so hot is the same reason the Earth is getting hotter, carbon dioxide gas. We are increasing the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere, so our planet is becoming more like Venus. This past week, the weather on our continent was topsy-turvy. Let me quickly tell you a quick update. Recent news. Dry weather has led to forest fire in Grayling, Michigan. And excessive rain is flooding Jacksonville, Florida. So these are two different extremes happening in our country at the very same time. It was hotter in the Northwest Ohio than it was in Miami, Florida. The humidity was lower here than it was in the desert in Palm Springs, California. We are deep in the period of unstable weather that was predicted by the global warming models, but it is happening much more quickly than those models predicted because of what, Rebecca?
Positive feedback loop.
That is correct. It should be positive feedback loops. Positive feedback loops, that's correct, because people who are profiting from destroying our planet probably believe they had about 100 years before the really harsh effects of global warming kicked in. They probably assumed they'd be able to comfortably live out their lives sailing their private yachts around or taking expensive cruises long before the droughts became deadly or the fires destroyed their mansions. So they were wrong. The earth is heating up so quickly that even men who made the conscious decision back in the 1980s to try to deceive the public to believe that global warming isn't real are starting to suffer themselves. This past week, the cruise ship Carnival Sunshine, the cruise ship named Carnival Sunshine, was hit with hurricane force winds that literally popped up out of nowhere. Decks were flooded, doors were ripped off their hinges, the disco ball on the floor was swinging wildly, and the ship arrived in port 9 hours late.
Not the disco ball.
Yeah, it,
Oh no.
it had its fall. There are few things us humans do that puts more carbon in the air that are less essential than cruise ships. There are some, though. Cruise ships at least provide recreation to thousands of people at once. Private yachts put tons of carbon dioxide in the air for the benefit of just a few people. Mega yachts are kept running all the time, waiting for their billionaire owners to have the whim that they want to go for a ride. You may have heard that it seems like even nature is rebelling against us, against this wasteful practice. Killer whales have started attacking private boats in the North Atlantic. This year, the whales around the Straits of Gibraltar have damaged or sunk 24 private yachts. Showing their intelligence, the whales coordinated their attacks, each whale taking a different job. Can you believe that?
They're going to erase your carbon footprint if you take your yacht over there.
My God. Better be careful. They
Yes.
focus first on the rudder, understanding that without the ability to steer, the yacht becomes crippled. Once the rudder is destroyed, they focus on cracking the hull. In this latest conflict between humans and nature, knowing that the owners of these private yachts probably got rich enough to buy them, they substantially destroying parts of the natural world. It's not hard to say, go whales! If any millionaire or billionaires are listening to this show and are considering buying a second or third yacht, you might want to take this as a sign. But those people seem to be incapable of changing their mindsets. The current push to create small modular reactors is a perfect illustration of the fact that they can't be taught. The billionaire Bill Gates has been pushing for these SMRs for decades now and changing federal and state laws and corrupting the nuclear regulatory commission in order for him to make even more billions building and selling these death machines. Today's guests, Pat Marida and Joe Mangano, are working to stop them. They are having a conference down in Piketon, Ohio, to talk about the health effects of nuclear pollution that the people of Piketon are already suffering from decades of being sacrificed to the nuclear industry. These SMRs or these SMRs can only operate for about 25 years because they don't have the concrete containment domes that traditional nuclear plants have. Gamma radiation from the nuclear reaction is constantly shooting out of the reactor through the walls, and as everything around the reactor is bathed in gamma radiation, it in turns becomes radioactive. So everything in the building, the walls, desks, clocks, windows, becomes radioactive wastes. What is the proposed solution to having a radioactive building? Literally, what they propose is to simply dig a hole on site and bury it. This is the same mindset as the men who buried their heads in the sand when confronted with the fact that their industry, the fossil fuel industry, was poisoning the earth with carbon dioxide. Poisoning the earth with radioactive wastes is actually worse than carbon dioxide because while it takes about 300 years for carbon dioxide to get out of the atmosphere, nuclear wastes take hundreds of thousands of years to become harmless. And just like with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, there is no over there with radioactive pollution. The water cycle, forest fires, even plate tectonics will mix radiation into the world's environment, eventually affecting everyone and everything. We know this because the Earth's background radiation has increased because of nuclear bomb explosions and nuclear power plant disasters. So the fight Pat and Joe are fighting is really very important and for very personal health and well-being and the health and well-being of our descendants for the next 20,000 generations. Let's go to the interview now and hear what they have to say. Welcome to For a Green Future. We are very happy to have you on our talk show. And we wanted to talk about your event in Piketon, Ohio on June 10th. But there's a lot going on we would like to cover. First, so to begin, could you both please tell us your name and what organizations you represent?
Sure. Thank you, Shehbaz. My name's Pat Marida, and I'm currently one of the coordinators with the Ohio Nuclear Free Network. And as an individual, I have been working on issues at the Portsmouth Nuclear Site down in Piketon, Ohio, in southern Ohio, since 1981, where they have been enriching uranium. And unfortunately, besides just uranium, they brought in high-level radioactive waste and ran it through 100 acres of buildings under roof, an enormous facility, and contaminated the whole site with radioactivity. So that's been one of the major things that we've worked on, both during the time I was with the Sierra Club for a number of years also.
And I'm Joseph Mangano. I'm an epidemiologist. I'm executive director of the Radiation and Public Health Project, or RPHP. And we are the only U.S. organization whose mission is to conduct studies of rates of cancer and other diseases near nuclear reactors.
Okay. Welcome again to both of you. Thank you very much for being here with us. Okay, Pat, to start off, could you give us an update on what's happening with HB 434? To remind our listeners, this is the bill that would create a nuclear authority that would have absolute power over everything having to do with radioactivity or nuclear power in Ohio. We have been following this bill from the beginning, and it had looked like it died in committee last fall, but it's been resurrected at the last minute, hasn't it? You were in Columbus yesterday. Pat was testifying against this. Could you please just catch us up on the current situation and tell us how it went yesterday?
So, yes, this bill has not been able to get out of committee. A similar bill was in the last three legislatures, but now it has been sneaked into the budget bill. So we are talking about 5,500 and some pages of the budget bill. And 10 pages of this would create this an entirely new Ohio department with absolutely no public debate. So I went down and testified before the committee yesterday saying, no, this needs these 10 pages that most of the legislators are not even aware is in there. Those need to be taken out. This 434, which is it is no more, but it's now in the budget bill. It would do all this work that Shehbaz was talking about in secret.
So what happens now? What can our listeners do? Pat, if you can please elaborate and explain it to us.
Well, what you can do is go to the website, just look up the website of the Ohio legislature, and in there you will see legislators, and you can look up by your zip code who your legislator is. If you don't know, you need to find your own Ohio senator and just give them a call. Their phone number is there, and to the office, and say, take the Ohio Nuclear Development Authority out of the budget bill.
Now, Mr. Mangano, we have been wanting to have you on this show for a very long time. You are one of the few people who are willing to actually look at the numbers when it comes to the health effects of radiation. Most of what the nuclear industry does is estimate what health effects should be based on lots of guesses in terms of exposure. You actually look at the actual statistics. This often puts you at odds with the powers that be, doesn't it? Could you please describe to us what you do and some of the things you have found out by looking at these data?
Well, the whole reason that RPHP was formed in the 1980s was pretty much what you said. The officials who regulate the nuclear industry set what they call permissible limits of radioactive emissions and radiation in the environment. And then they make a jump. They make an assumption and say anything below these limits is not only within regulations, but it is safe. It shows that nobody's being harmed. That is an assumption that should never be done in science. You have to do the study. So that's why our group was formed, because very few, almost no health researchers were doing these. And we've done 39 studies in peer-reviewed medical journals, numerous reports, 64 op-eds and 32 press conferences. And we found the following. First of all, we've done the only study that looks at radiation levels in the bodies of Americans living near nuclear plants. And that's what we call the Tooth Fairy Project. It's a study of now 5,000 teeth, baby teeth of children, and the levels of one of the chemicals produced in reactors and atomic bombs, strontium-90. And we found that near nuclear plants, the levels are high, they're rising, and they're linked with the risk of child cancer. Okay, another study that we did was we looked at when nuclear plants shut down, what happens to local infant and child health? Well, within the first 2 years, near every plant, there were sharp declines in infant deaths and in young children developing cancer. The final thing we've done is we've done reports in areas near reactors in a number of states. Just taking a look at a basic question: what's the cancer rate near the nuclear plant? I mean, that's a very basic question which nobody knows. And in pretty much every case, we found that when the plant opens, the county cancer rate is about the same as the U.S. or maybe sometimes less. But within a couple of years, the two rates are even, and after that, the county rate goes higher than the U.S. rate and higher. The gap grows over time. That we've seen consistently, and one of the places we found that is in Piketon, which I'll talk about in a little bit.
One quick question, follow-up question on this, I mean, if you don't mind. That is, like, I clearly understand it is putting you against these powerful corporations, but I also understand that there are many of these studies conducted which are sponsored and financed by these corporations as well. So do you also come across or had to fight such studies as well? A quick reply on that, if you don't mind.
Yes, you are correct in what you say. From the beginning, our group made a commitment to not accepting any funds from government and not accepting any funds from industry. We get them from in private individuals and private foundations. So in order to be completely objective.
Wonderful. So moving ahead, one of the most controversial studies you did was on the immediate effects of the radiation from the Fukushima nuclear disaster in the US. You found definite signs of health effects from that radiation, but were, I must say, very widely criticized for cherry-picking data. What were your findings and how did you respond to that criticism?
Well, Fukushima was no different than other meltdowns, 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, because right after that, leaders of the nuclear industry and regulators came out and said, Nobody died. Nobody was harmed. Okay. And this was, as you know, 3 cores, reactor cores melted down, and a waste pool with lots of hazardous waste melted down. And even today, 12 years later, they're still spewing radiation into the Pacific Ocean every day. Well, we thought that was yet again an assumption that is really based on nothing. So, along with Dr. Janet Sherman, one of our long-term members, we did some studies. First of all, we looked at EPA data, which looked at radiation levels in the air across the United States before and after Fukushima. And we found that by far the Pacific coast got much, much higher levels. In fact, within 4 days of the meltdown, the first airborne radiation came over the US. Second thing we did was we looked at really the most vulnerable, the infants. You know, everyone's affected by radiation. The youngest, such as infants, are affected the most. We found that in the 9 months to a year following Fukushima, on the West Coast, the levels of birth defects were much higher than before, and the levels or the rates of babies born with underdeveloped thyroid glands, which is, as we know, affected by radioactive iodine. And we published them. And yes, there were people who called it controversial and all. To me, this, and I think to any objective scientist, this is very basic evidence that you have to examine and follow up on. Nobody else did any studies like this, by the way. And no one else could explain why the thyroid, meant more underdeveloped thyroids occurred and why there were more birth defects occurred.
So let's talk about June 10th. Would you like to give us the background on what's happening in Piketon and what this event on 10th of June is about?
Yeah, so the Ohio Nuclear Free Network, we are hosting a citizen forum, and it's going to be on radioactive contamination, environment, and public health, which Joe will be speaking about, the effects from his study of Pike County down there. And lawyer Terry Lodge will be speaking about the future of the Portsmouth nuclear site. So that will be held at the Comfort Inn at 1 p.m. on June the 10th, Saturday. Terry Lodge has been a lawyer that's been working with the network, and he has challenged the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's licensing of 2 new nuclear industries down at the Portsmouth nuclear site without doing the required environmental impact statement. And then there's a number of proposals down there. One of them is for 2 new small reactors, but these are the type that would be just left, would run for 20 years, would be buried on site in cracked rock above the aquifer. So this is extremely serious. And then our first speaker will be Dr. Michael Ketterer. He's an analytical chemist and a professor emeritus of biochemistry at Northern Arizona University. He's studied the samples. He's run them through samples from off-site at the Portsmouth nuclear site, which is right outside Piketon, Ohio. And he has discovered that he has proven that these radioactive isotopes he's found in the soil and in people's attics are indeed from plant. There's no registration. You can go online and look for the Ohio Nuclear Free Network, our channel on YouTube, and it will be live streamed there, and it will also be recorded there, so you can watch it after the fact if you miss it. We certainly encourage people to go in person. That'll be really great to be able to meet the speakers and so forth. But it is at 1 p.m. Saturday, June 10th at the Comfort Inn, which is right on Route 23, very easy to find in Piketon, Ohio.
You are going to present a new study, 7-county study. Can you give us some previews of what your study will show, and if I might add, uh, also talk about the methodology.
Okay, actually, there are two studies that will be discussed. The first one has been made public November 2022, and then the second one, the follow-up, will be made public that day, June 10th. The first study came at a request from the ONFN group. They wanted some answers to basic questions. What are cancer rates like near the Piketon plant? And the only evidence that we have was a study done back in the 1980s by order of Senator Edward Kennedy, and it showed that when the plant first opened, the Pike County cancer death rate was like 13% below the U.S. We needed more updated data. That study is really obsolete. And what we found was that as time went on, once again, the county changed from one below the U.S. rate to much higher than the U.S. rate. It is the cancer death rate now is 33% above the U.S. It is the county with the highest cancer incidence rate, that's cases, of any of the 88 Ohio counties. And to go beyond cancer, I looked at premature deaths, people who die age 74 and younger. 40 or 50 years ago, the county death rate was slightly above the U.S., which is something we would expect. Now it is 85% higher. Okay, almost double. 100% would be double. Okay, it is one of the highest premature death rates of any of the 3,000 counties in the United States. This was published, and the group was so concerned about this, they had me do another study, which will be presented in June. And we looked at two questions. Number one, did this occur just in Pike County, or were the surrounding counties affected as well? And number two, is this happening just because Pike County is located in Appalachia, because it's a poor county and may have limited access to good medical care and so on? That will be discussed on June 10th. The short answer is no. Most of it cannot be explained by those two factors. It's something else. And we believe that the radioactive exposures from Portsmouth is certainly a big factor.
When you talked about the Tooth Fairy project, and you mentioned about conducting a study near the nuclear plants. So do you have what kind of radius area should be determined near a nuclear power plant, or how it should be determined?
That's a very good question. There is no exact answer, because radiation, when it leaves a nuclear plant and gets into the environment, in the air, it follows the wind patterns, the directions, and winds swirl, and then it returns to Earth in precipitation, through rain and snow. So it's not like exact circles, the highest, next highest, next high. But generally, we find that county where the reactor is located, and maybe another county or two beyond that, have considerably higher levels of strontium-90 in their teeth than areas elsewhere in the state, far from any reactor. And the excess is about 50% higher.
So what do you both hope to accomplish with this event? What do you hope people come away?
I hope this will cause people will start talking again and start talking about exposing the Department of Energy and what they've been, the deception that's been going on. First they said that there was no plutonium there at the plant, which there was. Then they said what was found came from Nevada test site. It came from there. Then they said there was nothing above background, and now they say not to worry, it's acceptable limits, and they don't answer questions. So we hope to get, actually, our legislators need to get involved and start taking control and start looking at what these agencies, the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, are doing. And it's a big project because the U.S. military is quite interested in keeping nuclear viable, and so we have opponents in high places.
My answer to that question is we would like to see two groups of people become more aware and more concerned and take action. One group would be the public at large, and the other would be public officials. Okay, the public officials, the regulators and elected officials, have a duty to protect local residents from the dangers of radiation. When evidence like this is presented, an immediate red flag goes up, that what once was a not so unhealthy area has become a very unhealthy area. Okay, and this must be taken seriously, not just as a look back at the past, but to make any adjustments to the future. For example, the decommissioning process, is this working well? Is it effective or not? And of course, another aspect would be, are we going to add any other nuclear related functions to this plant? The answer should be absolutely no. This community has taken a beating health-wise, and it looks like the Portsmouth plant has been largely responsible. So we want that to happen. But of course, we want the average citizen to know, because very often in these matters, the answers don't come from the top down. They come from the bottom up. It's public pressure and informed citizen pressure to do something that will make the leaders act accordingly. So that's what we hope to get out of it.
Would you, any of you or both of you, like to add before we end this interview?
I'll just say that RPHP's website is www.radiation.org. On the homepage, you'll see the first study near the Portsmouth plant, and soon, right around June 10, the new report will be posted.
For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They also restore wildlife habitats and lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them and find out what's happening. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, www.wcparks.org. The website again is www.wcparks.org. They are also available on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and many others. Just search for WC Parks. That's the Wood County Park District, and we're very grateful for their support.
And thank you very much for this show. For a Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons, and we are highly grateful to them as well. These are people who understand that we have come together to change a society from one that is literally burning through its resources to one that operates sustainably. This requires that we all have the kind of information that we provide here on our show, and they decided to help. They did They did this by going on patreon.com and searched for a green future. Our page popped up and they signed up to give donation that matched their budget. So now a little bit comes out of their account each month and comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to stay on the air. Now it is time for Rebecca to take the center stage.
Hi there. So it turns out today, this very day, is National Prairie Day, which suggested a topic in a subtle sort of a way, roundabout, if you will. So yeah, a prairie, apparently broadly defined, is an ecosystem considered part of the temperate grassland, savanna, and shrublands biome. It has they all have similar climates, moderate rainfall, grasses, herbs, and shrubs are the dominant vegetation type. Broadly defined, this would include the pampas of Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay, the steppes of Ukraine, Russia, and Kazakhstan. But usually the word prairie is mostly used to describe North American grasslands. So roughly speaking, one definition would be the interior lowlands of Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, including mostly the Great Plains and some of the wetter, hillier lands to the east. And also the Palouse of Washington, which I had never heard of, but it's a thing, apparently. There's a Palouse in Washington State. And the Central Valley of California is also considered to be a prairie. They're characterized by rich fauna and flora and often rich soil. So right away, we see that this term sounds a little slippery, like maybe people are using word prairie to mean different things, even in the ecology field. But that's roughly what it means. Temperate grasslands, not too wet, not too dry. The three types are shortgrass, mixed grass, and tallgrass prairie. It's from the French word for meadow, which is from the Latin word praetum, also meaning meadow. So yeah, meadows are prairies are formed the soil is formed from glacial till and also wind formed loess. Is that how you say it? Loess, Loess. I've always kind of wondered. Nobody really said it for me.
Wind losses?
Loess. I don't know.
LOSSES?
LOESS. It's an
Okay.
ecological term that I've never heard anyone say out loud, actually.
That's very tongue twisting.
So, yeah, in pre-Columbian time, pre-European times, they were grazed by bison, elk, and white-tailed deer. Humans and grazing animals apparently helped actually make the prairies because through grazing and also fire. Because without those two things, the trees would encroach and creep in and prevent the prairies from being, actually. Both humans and grazing animals help distribute graminoids and forbs, which are the two major plant types, I guess. I looked them up. A forb is an herbaceous flowering plant, which is not a graminoid. All right. So a graminoid is an herbaceous plant with grass-like morphology. So basically those are big words for things that look like grass on a prairie and things that don't look like grass on a prairie is what those two words mean effectively. Also, fire helps put nutrients back into the soil, and apparently they've been human set for a very long time, like maybe almost since there's been humans here. And the reason this creates the prairie instead of just a wasteland is that fire destroys most trees, but most prairie species can be up to 70%, have up to 70% of their biomass below the soil.
Wow.
Which I found, the one time I was in Wyoming, we tried to stop and feed some horses, because, I grew up, we'd go on road trips, we'd get a little bored, need to stretch our legs, we'd pull over the side of the road, pull up clumps of grass and feed the cows. I'd won. Wyoming cows have a lot of attitude and are not coming anywhere near you. Sorry. And item 2, the grass is incredibly deep rooted, so that I had a billion little cuts on my palm, which I found out when we got to the Thai restaurant and I tried to squeeze lime on my food. It hurt quite a bit. So yeah, it also mentioned oak savannas, which caught my attention because I live in Northwest Ohio where we have oak openings, which is oak savanna, which serve as transitional zones between forest and prairies in the Midwest. And apparently it more or less goes east to west. It goes from tall grass, mixed grass, and then short grass as you get further west. So that is more or less how prairies work.
Wow. Thank you very much for this enlightening information. I mean, I don't think people look at prairies that way, the way you looked at it and provided so much information on that.
Right.
And speaking of information, what we do on this show for a green future is try to keep our listeners updated and well informed. So here comes the ecological news. More than 1,500 arrested at Hague. Extinction Rebellion, a group on May 27th, organized a mass protest at The Hague where 1,579 people were arrested, according to the Dutch police. According to a May 27th article in The Guardian, they were protesting government subsidies for fossil fuel industries. Even as governments proclaim the need to end fossil fuel use and switch to renewable energy sources, they spend many billions of dollars subsidizing that same fossil fuel use. In the US, fossil fuels are subsidized at about 10 times the rate of renewable energy like wind and solar. There were about 7,000 people at the protest in total. They blocked roadways and stayed even though police used water cannons to try to break the protest up. This is the 7th protest by the group Extinction Rebellion, who has organized targeting this section of roadway which leads to the Parliament building and other government offices. According to Extinction Rebellion, each protest has had roughly double the number of protesters as the previous one. They vow to continue until the government of Netherlands stops subsidizing fossil fuels. Moving on to the next news, International Uranium Festival. On May 28th, the International Uranium Film Festival concluded in Brazil. The festival focuses on films that examine both nuclear power and nuclear weapon and issue they raise. This year's movies were exceptionally good. The Best First Feature Documentary Award goes to Julian Vogel from Sweden for his film Intercontinental Bunker Mission, ICBM. That's very satirical. This humorous film looks at the movement to create underground shelters which were supposed to protect people in case of nuclear war. The film Radioactive, the women of 3 Mile Island, took home the award for Best Investigative Documentary. Further vindication for a film that we here at For a Green Future have been following since its inception. Radioactive has been taking home awards for film festivals all over the country and now all over the world. The award for Best Documentary went to the film Downwinders. Downwinders, excuse me. This documentary looks at the long-lasting health effects of nuclear bomb testing in the western United States. It features a star-studded cast including Martin Sheen and Michael Douglas. Some of these films are available for watching on the internet, and the links of all of them can be found at the website uraniumfilmfestival.org. Moving on to the next news. Ohio state parks to become oil fields. In a May 29th story in Cleveland.com entitled Ohio Opens Door Applications for Oil and Gas Drilling Underneath State Parks by Jeremy Pelzer. He describes Governor DeWine's plan to turn our state parks into fossil fuel extraction wastelands. While the permits don't allow drilling actually inside the park boundaries, our parks will literally be surrounded by drilling pads that go right up to the edge of park boundaries, often just a few feet from streams and lakes. Oil and gas drilling contaminates groundwater, creates noise and light pollution, and emits toxic fumes that harm wildlife and have been linked to a host of human respiratory diseases and cancers. As an example, Salt Fork Park will be completely encircled by 14 drilling pads, some right next to the hiking trails, and all a disaster for the plants and animals in the park. Drilling permit sales began this past Tuesday. Moving on to the next news. Transmission hookup delays threaten clean energy transition. A story in Canary Media on May 30th by Jeff St. John describes a new Natural Resource Defense Council (NRDC) study that says there is a growing backlog of interconnection applications for hooking new power sources to the grid. Every time a new wind or solar farm is connected to the grid, there must be a study done to ensure that the new power source can be accommodated without affecting the stability of the electrical grid. Grid operator PJM has to review and approve these studies before any power can be delivered. The NRDC study says that PJM is so backlogged that many projects face a delay of 3 years or more. PJM is revising its procedures to make them more efficient, but those revisions themselves take time. Meanwhile, more than 1,250 projects that could be putting carbon-free electricity onto the grid are being forced to sit in limbo. Moving on to the next news. Governor extends corrupt invitations to journalists again. Longtime listeners to this show For a Green Future know that each year we, along with environmental reporters from all over the state of Ohio, have received an invitation to the governor's fishing day. This day long extravaganza takes reporters out onto Lake Erie for a fun day for fishing. The outing includes snacks, drinks, and free lunch. Plus, reporters get to go out on the boat with prominent Republican lawmakers, state senators, and representatives, and the like. The problem is that this is precisely the kind of gift that is forbidden by the Journalist Code of Ethics adopted by the SPJ, Society of Professional Journalists. We have interviewed the ethics chair at the SPJ in the past years, and he agreed. Politicians are experts at winning people over, so spending a beautiful day out on Lake Erie with a Republican senator, fishing and having fun, can't help but influence an environmental reporter when that same senator later proposes legislation which would hurt the environment. So, needless to say, we here at For a Green Future won't be accepting the governor's invitation this year or any other. And before I finish, let me quickly add a last news. This is about the budget deal guts, NEPA. Joe Biden's deal to raise the debt ceiling has gutted the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA. We are still analyzing the many changes to the NEPA law and will have more details in next week's show. But some of the revisions includes limits in how many pages environmental impact statements can be, eliminating the public's ability to comment on or influence decisions, creating a tremendous loophole that allows the government to create environmentally damaging projects. If the agency funding that project doesn't have, then they have to have any regulatory oversight or whatever the project creates. Basically saying that the government isn't actually responsible for what it does. That irresponsibility is at the heart of the damage done to NEPA by Biden and the Republicans both. So this was the show for you today. This is the information we could bring in for you. And before we close down, we would like to let you know and invite all your comments, suggestions, and experiences which you have on Joe at the rate Joe D. Mayor for a Green Future.org. Any last comments before we close the show, Rebecca?
That's about it.
All right, guys, have a wonderful weekend and see you next week.
No. I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.